Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates, viewers. Now, this morning we are chatting with economist Dr. Vanus James as we discuss some of the things in relation to constitutional reform. If you were paying attention to our morning show, you would have heard from Dr. Terence Farrell, who is one of the committee members for that team that is treating with constitutional reform. And as you know, in January, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced that we are going to go for another round of consultations in the nation to see what we can do about our constitution, what needs to be changed, what needs to be improved, and hopefully by June, the committee has been given until June to come up with their recommendations and so on to put forward to Parliament and take it from there. Now, again, I'm being joined by economist Dr. Vanus James. And, you know, Dr. Vanus James, good morning, first of all, and welcome to you.
Morning and morning, Tobago.
Great, and great to have you. But I mean, we've been speaking about this for a couple of months now, and you are one of those people that have decided to take the time in Tobago and go out to the communities and actually meet, you know, within the different sectors of communities and gather views on what people are saying about constitutional reform or how people view constitutional reform. What are some of those things what are some of those feedback that you are getting from people when you go throughout the communities?
Well, I suppose the first thing that I should say to Tobagonians at large and maybe to the country is that these focus groups that I hold prove beyond a reasonable doubt to me that Tobagonians are extremely wise and well-informed people. Mm-hmm. And we can know exactly how to set up our government in the country and in Tobago and in the communities if we listen to them.
Certainly.
That's the first point I would like to make. Secondly, I find the communities are clear that they want 3 levels of government in the country. One at the community level, where they can focus their attention on the development of community enterprise and drive the initiative towards community development with no community left behind. The other at the local government level, including the THA, including Tobago. And the third at the central government level. And they want the design of the government to be such that on the financing front, each level gets access to a fair share of the national pool so they could do pursue their charters. And at the community level, communities want carefully organized community councils with joint decision-making potential, designed to hear from the communities what people want to do. So no dictatorship in the community, with a CEO of sorts that would lead the implementation of community council decisions under oversight, mm-hmm. Right? Oversight for them is a process in which the community council calls in the community on all major issues to find out what the community wants. That's an important insight they have that I think is the right insight because it gives them the maximum possible information on which to make judgments. Of course, the community still has to take a vote. The council still has to take a vote on what is to be done, and that would be binding on the CEO and the mayor, if you want to call him that, or her that. So that's the first thing. And they want a fair access to a decent budget that would allow them to pursue that agenda with a focus on community enterprise. Mm-hmm. You remember long ago when we used to talk, you're too young to remember maybe, when cooperatives was the big talk in the town. But it was cooperatives largely based on a volunteer basis. The communities have a good insight that if that was done with community power behind it and a community budget every year to drive it, they could pick the right kinds of enterprises and succeed. And I think they're right on that, speaking as an economist myself. And then they want access to a THA organized in such a way that they could go and represent community interests whenever THA is going to be making, or let me say the Tobago government, however that is organized, is going to be making any decisions that would affect the communities. They want to be able to speak in the forum where that decision is being made.
So, okay, so I'm going to break it down a little bit now to discuss these three things. And I'm going to start with the last point first, and the THA, because, I mean, of course, we know these conversations about how the THA should work with the government. We continue to have these all the time. But if I understand you clearly, we're seeing more and more from the people in Tobago that idea of that the people's house sort of thing, or that representation of that community voice within that THA needs to be stronger.
Yes, people are clear that they do, and many of them said long overdue. We do not want a dictatorial THA.
Right.
I've spoken to 4 communities so far. That's about 50-something persons. And we're doing another one tonight, and so on. And they're all adamant that they need to have a say as a community represented, as in a THA's system that allows them to represent their own views on what they find important and what they find to be right about whatever the THA would do that would influence what they're doing. So if they're doing business and the THA is making policy that would influence the business success, they want to be able to weigh in on what the policies should be. And if they're helping to develop their children, for example, with better extra lessons and so on, they need to weigh in on whatever decisions the THA is making about education development in Tobago. They do not want a THA that is making decisions and forcing anything down their throats. That came out very clearly in all 4 communities. They also want that same principle to apply to the central government. I mean, this is wisdom that I had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn over my lifetime. You go there and you hear them, clear as daylight. They want the same access to any decision-making process that you have in the central government that would influence their lives.
Now, what about, in a sense, if I understand you clearly, let's say that the ministers, when they go to Parliament, because, I mean, every week there's something else that's being debated, a new bill that's being deliberated upon, amendments, is it that they're saying that they would like to see their ministers, and of course, and this should be throughout the whole country, come to the community and be like, okay, this is a bill that's being debated,
No.
what would you be your views?
They're not saying that. They're saying the Parliament has to be organized in such a way that it has committees that are responsible for the various portfolios, like education. And when Parliament is making law that would shape policy and influence what they do in their communities regarding education, curricula, whatever they're doing, they want to be able to go to those committees and weigh in. That doesn't exist now. They want that. They want the government to be organized in such a way that they can weigh in. And one lady said, put an end to the top-down government. We want bottom-up government. I didn't put that into their mouth. They came out and said that. They want to be able to access the decision-making structures of the government to allow them to represent their own interests in those decision-making processes at the THA level and at the central government level. Now, let me tell you how these sessions are organized. I don't do any lectures. I simply ask 5 questions, and each person in the forum answers 1 question at a time. Question 1, we go around the rounds. Question 2, we go around the rounds, and so on, all the way to 5. No pre-lecturing, no counseling, nothing. Just straight cold turkey. And this is what the communities are saying. Amazing wisdom.
Now, I want to know now, how do we put that into the Constitution? How do we put the idea of having these committees that is a valid voice into the
framework
Parliament?
for a valid voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I'll tell you the answer to that. But it takes time to walk through structurally for the THA and for the central government, because they're talking 3 layers of government.
Yes. Well, let's start with the central government because, I mean, the Constitution is what enacts the THA, and of course, we're still trying to figure out some of those things for the THA. I mean, later on, hopefully later on in this sitting of Parliament, we'll be able to figure out some things. We'll be able to perhaps have some answers. But then, how do we have that oversight? How do we have that voice written into that Constitution?
Can I answer you? But before I answer that, can I tell you the last thing they are calling for?
What's that?
They want to deal with this problem that has historically plagued the country. Lands for me left behind. Speyside left behind. Canaan Bonaccord developing. Mayaro left behind. Port of Spain developing. They want that to be dealt with properly. And they want that to be dealt with by a special authority in the government. Well, I can tell you what that means. That practically means a Senate that is elected with the authority to do that job, to ensure nobody is left behind. That's what's done they must see it on TV when the British people are talking about leveling up and the Americans have states' rights, equality of opportunity and all that sort of stuff. It's the same principle. But all they know is from their experience, lands from have been left behind for 62 years. They want to put an end to that. So those are the main demands I got from them. And I say demands, the things they want in the Constitution. Now, how do we put it in? Well, first of all, you have to recognize the principle that is implied in their requests of joint decision-making systems. And to do that, you have to set up both the THA and the central government that way. Now, that means the House of Representatives, by design, has to change. And the THA has to change, so that executive decisions are made on advisement, meaning you have oversight, right? Oversight comes when the House is designed in such a way, and the Senate designed in such a way, that the executive is a tiny share of the whole House. So if you have a House with 42 members now like we have, or 41, then you can't have an executive of more than 6 or 7 people. You have an executive now of 20-something. You can't do that. The executive has to be a tiny share, so you could give effect to the provision in the Constitution that says that the executive is collectively accountable to the Parliament. When the executive is the majority of the Parliament, it cannot be collectively accountable. It dominates the Parliament.
Which is what we have right now.
Which is what you have now. But when you respect what the communities are saying, what you will do is you will change the size of the Parliament, so that if you make up your mind you're sticking with 15 cabinet members, the Parliament as a whole has to be somewhere near 90 members. And in that context, you will have somewhere near 75, 76, 77 members who go to Parliament to make the law. Right? They're not going to be in the cabinet, they're going to make the law. And the majority of the people who have won the elections to form the government will be such that more of them are outside of the cabinet, focused on lawmaking, than are in the cabinet. So you will have 20 members from the winning side outside of the cabinet and 15 in the cabinet. And that 20, therefore, can outvote the 15. And that's what gives you effective conditions for oversight.
And we're going to explore that idea a little bit more and how we work that into the Constitution, but we have to go for a quick break. So viewers, please don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, I am chatting this morning with economist Dr. Vanus James, and somebody who has been very instrumental in matters of our Constitution and has actually taken it upon himself to go through communities on his own, meet with people, gather views and so on. And one of the views that he's been able to gather so far is that of people wanting, or citizens wanting, more of their voice in how we make our laws and so on in Parliament. And this goes beyond just having elected members of Parliament. It just goes beyond that 41, having those committees of oversight that has even a greater voice or a greater voting power than our MPs. But then how do we get, Dr. James, how do we get these people to be a part of these members? What is the mechanism that you are proposing to be able to have these, to establish these oversight committees?
You establish the Parliament. They are members of Parliament. They're elected in the normal way. So, as I was saying, for Trinidad and Tobago, you have a Parliament of 92, say, 95. And all are elected, including the winning side that will have the right to form the government and pick the Prime Minister. I think we can stick with that rather than go to a system of government in which we have an authoritarian executive we can't control. The current problem we have is that executive power is difficult to control in any system of government. And it is always the sore point. Executives doing what they want with people's money and power and gun, and nobody can control them. That's the problem we really have, and that's the source of all the gripe in the society. You have Rowley in power, executive control, executive domination, dictatorship. Kamala in power, same khaki pants. People want to change that. Now we have to give that thought. And the communities having lived through that, many of these people, some of them tell me that I'm 70 years old, this is long overdue. They know that that is the problem, and they want to change that. And the way you change that is you set up the Parliament differently. So if you say you put a winning side of 45, no more than 15 of them could be in the cabinet. So 30 people are available to oversee the cabinet from the winning side. That's the first thing. All elected. The Prime Minister too. And they will solve a problem with that the country has now. The Prime Minister can oversee the ministers, but there's nobody to oversee the Prime Minister. Nobody could evaluate the way he does his job. If you had this 30 non-executive members of the winning side, they could evaluate his job and decide if they want to fire him. We see it happening in Britain, for example. But it can't happen here until you call another election. So you could waste 5 years with an incompetent or even corrupt Prime Minister, and the Parliament is saddled with the inability to remove that person. That is also what you sacrifice when you go for an elected president. When they pick an elected president like Louis Singh and them saying,
yes,
they're going to find themselves in a position where to remove that president when you don't like the president, you have to hold another election. And we've seen from our history, it's 5 years of tyranny before you could get them out. And sometimes you can't get them out. Williams lasted 25 years. The country longing to remove him from power and couldn't. So that's issue number one. You set up the government so that the winning side has a majority not in the executive that is able to oversee the work of the whole cabinet, including the head of the cabinet. That would be required in Tobago and in Trinidad. And the losing side is not left out of the government. The way you do that is you provide for oversight committees reflecting the structure of the outcome of the elections. So if 45 win on the winning side and there are 40 on the losing side, that's 4.5 to 4. That's the same ratio you use to set up the committees. So there will be a majority on every committee, oversight committee, from the winning side. But the losing side is in there too, and they can participate, push for compromise, influence, and so on to decide what is to be done on all lawmaking matters. Now remember, the reason you make law is to ring-fence policy. So they will now have a say in the way the law is made. Now remember that you need committees to oversee the executive functions. So if you have 9 ministries or 15 ministries, you need to set up enough committees, maybe 6, 7, I think could do, and they just double up on how many ministries they're overseeing. And you set them up properly with the structure of the parliament reflected in the size and the structure of the committees. You need no more than 6 or 7 people in a committee. But their job every day is to look at what's going on in the division or in the ministry, as the case might be, evaluate, investigate, propose new laws, bring them to the floor of the parliament, of the House of Representatives in this case, and ensure that they can guide the House in making law to ring-fence the behavior of the executive. That's what's missing in the country. And it's instinctively, although they can't formulate it technically, that's what the committees are saying they really want.
Now, is there any example of such a model that is existing in any other territory in the world?
That's what Westminster is. What I'm just describing there for you is the Westminster system. Mm-hmm. What we're running now is not the Westminster system. This is parliamentary dictatorship. But you saw it happen. You were there to see how they removed Boris Johnson. The same problem, same system, same structure. That's how they remove Liz Truss, and that's how they're controlling Richie Sunak now. It's the existence of these mechanisms by which you could bring the public in. That's what oversight is, not the elected members making decisions on their own. You know, they make the decisions by setting up hearings, calling the society. You see it clear in the US. Ask the society, well, what do you think we should do for education development in Tobago? And you hold 2 months of hearings on that. Mm-hmm. You will get all the experts to come and tell you. And then as a committee, you make up your mind what you think should come from it. And you take that to the THA. And the THA will vote. Everybody will throw in their vote. And then but the importance of that is you get all the information. You get information from the teachers, you get information from the parents, you even could get information from the students, the researchers, the public service experts. Everybody gets to weigh in. That's what we call full information policy making. And that's all the economic models that I am able to build guide me to the need for that approach to policy making if you want to develop a place like Trinidad and Tobago.
Now, I want to ask you a little bit about just the idea of referendums and so on, because I know that in our constitution, we don't exactly have provisions for something like that. And this was a proposal that even came out of Timothy Hamel-Smith and Mr. Louis Singh and they out of their party that they presented yesterday at the press conference. Now, what do you think about that idea of having those provisions for referendums as part of the mechanism to ensure that there's greater participation from the public in the decision making, in the law making of Trinidad and Tobago?
If you set up the government properly, you have very minimal need for referendums. Very minimal.
Okay.
It has to be something that is of real overriding national importance for you to have to ask the entire citizen. Citizenry, like in an election, choosing the government, it's a kind of referendum. You go to the society and you say, let's pick the government. And everybody gets to weigh in above a certain age. That's the same basic principle behind the referendum. There are few critical things we need. Not even the constitutional reform process needs to be taken to the level of a referendum. But there may be a few critical things, like changing the condition for citizenry, for anybody to become a citizen, foreign, local, as case might be. You may want to change those things, and you will say, well, everybody is going to be affected in some such a critical way that what we really need to do is go ask everybody their opinions. But I think you can't govern effectively if you overplay the role of referenda, because it's too clumsy. So what you really need to do is design the government properly so you could hear the voice of the people. And that's what the oversight committees that are holding hearings and doing investigations would deliver. It's another way to get all the information you need, but on a volunteer basis. Who come. The communities want something else. They want an elected Senate. Very clear. They made it very in every one of those meetings so far. They are clear they want an elected Senate. But they don't just want an elected Senate. They want it to do a specific job. And the job is to look after spatial equality. Lands for me won't be left behind, right? And Canaan Bonaccord alone developing. They don't want that. So they want a elected Senate to pay attention to that, to see using the development budget of Tobago allow for fair access to development allocations, community by community, area by area, so that everybody gets a chance to spend money to pursue the development of their area. And to do that, you have to have an elected Senate with representation, so they could say, my representatives say. And then give that elected Senate one critical authority, the authority to advise and consent on the development budget, on the capital expenditures. When you do that, 4 senators out of, say, 31 or 32 could hold up the development budget until they see fairness.
So in other words, you're taking away the power, the overriding power of the Minister of Finance and how the budget is allocated.
Absolutely. Too much authority unfettered. And we have seen what we got. After 62 years, look what we're quarreling about in the country. No diversification, Mayaro left behind, Toko left behind, Pinal left behind. The whole country is suffering when you have authoritarian government. What we have in Trinidad and Tobago is an extremely authoritarian government in which the population that owns the country has no say. I don't think you solve that problem in the way people are talking about it by then putting together an elected president with executive authority to lord it over everybody. That's the only person who will be elected by the entire society. Everybody else is elected for a constituency. And then you hand in that person executive power in an authoritarian culture in which people have learned over 400 years of oppression to be afraid of executive authority. And they back off and they say, you win, you get it done. So they don't get involved. And that's what's plaguing the existing authoritarian system that we have. And the way you deal with that is you arrange for real power sharing. So I would not go down the road of an executive president in Trinidad and Tobago to lord it over Tobago, for example. I wouldn't want that because I don't want no single executive in Trinidad to come and tell Tobago what to do. I need a president who is ceremonial and must obey the strictures of the parliament. We send the president a law. We primarily need the president to sign law. You send the president a law, study the law, make up your mind. Do you want to sign or not? You don't want to sign? The parliament has the right to decide if to override your decision. And if we can muster the 2/3 majority to override the president's decision, then the president must sign. If you had an executive president, like in the US, with one person representing the whole country, you know what will happen? That person, when members from Landsformy say, we don't want the president to sign this law, you know what the president said? Well, I represent the whole of Trinidad and Tobago. You are only Landsformy. You have to follow me. And the politics of authoritarianism will drive Landsformy into the dust. So you can't get real democracy in an authoritarian system when you put all these executive powers unconstrained into the Constitution, unless you set up the constraining system. The Americans have designed a constraining system, so unless you're saying you're going to embrace the American structure, which we have no experience working, I would say keep away from this elected executive president and set up constraining systems in the parliament to control a ceremonial president and to control the prime minister.
Now, I want to know what is the wording, and these are the things that need to be changed. What are the clauses that needs to be changed within our constitution to make something like that happen?
Well, there are provisions in the constitution that sets out the design of the parliament.
Yes.
The number of members. So you'll have to go there, identify that, and change that. Right? You have to enlarge it, first of all. You have to add clauses that restricts the size of the cabinet. Right now, on the winning side, everybody could be in the cabinet. Right? And if you win and everybody in the cabinet, that's cabinet dictatorship. So you have to restrict that by adding clause in the Constitution that says that the cabinet can be no more than so many, right? And so on. The current Constitution has to be changed to provide not for these vague joint select committees that don't have any specific mandate, but to arrange for specific oversight committees overseeing the ministries in the case of the national government and overseeing the divisions in the case of the THA or in the case of the local government bodies in Trinidad.
So, in other words, we could even enhance what we have now as a joint select committee?
Enormously. Enormous enhancement is possible. And you also need to change the Constitution to deal with the Senate. You have to now provide for 15 senatorial districts, 16 senatorial districts, senatorial constituencies, and elect, say, 2 members per constituency, so you could build up a Senate of 32. And you have to change the role of the Senate in terms of its oversight of the development budgetary function, its responsibility to advise and consent on the structure of the development budget. And you have to make provisions for the Senate to play the primary role that the Prime Minister now plays in appointments of everybody who are appointed senior, judges, senior public servants. You take away that role from the Prime Minister. Prime Minister is just the chief executive, not the chief boss of everybody. And you must take the Prime Minister out of the process of appointing judges, other than to nominate them if you want. But the Senate must say, these are the judges that we agree to. And so, the same for senior public servants. When you want to appoint so and so under these commissions that we have, I would rethink the commissions myself, but even if you keep them, when they make proposals, the Prime Minister has no say. It's the Senate that you need to take a look at those kinds of things. This was the one fundamentally sensible proposal that I think came out of the Wooding Commission on which Reggie Dumas sat.
That was in 1976.
Yeah, that was an important provision, that you take the appointments away from the Prime Minister and put it in the hands of the Senate. But they didn't want an elected Senate. They wanted some sort of...
They basically wanted the authority to continue authoritative governance.
Well, the design that they came out with would have continued authoritarian systems of government in the country because they didn't have the oversight mechanism. That's the critical thing that is missing from what we're doing. And you have to have a large enough parliament to allow for effective oversight. Now, the story of the Senate is important because, remember, that's the way Tobago, for example, will get its autonomy. That's what autonomy really would mean for Tobago and for the local government bodies.
Well, we're going to get into that, but we got to go for a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll discuss how does autonomy work into that conversation. So, viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning as we discuss constitutional reform with Dr. Vanus James, who has been going through the communities and gathering views from Tobagonians themselves about how this all should work as the government, as the Oversight Committee is treating with how do we go about constitutional reform. And of course, we know that they have a June deadline, which is coming up pretty soon. But in the meantime, now I want to discuss autonomy, and not just autonomy for Tobago, because we also have the local government. And over the past few years, the central government has made moves to sort of develop or reform the local government system to match that of the THA. And of course, all of that comes with autonomy for both parts of local governments, because the THA is essentially a local government here for the island. So then, at a time where we in Tobago are considering more autonomy, whether it's self-determination, self-governance, whatever the form it looks like, how does that now all work into the constitutional reform?
Well, if you listen to the communities, you get the answer, because they're saying the same design of the central government we were discussing is the same design you want for the THA. And the centerpiece of their notion is they need to have a say when decisions are being made that would affect them. That's the correct answer across the board for all constitutional designs all over the world. It's, I don't know where they get the information from, but they're deadly accurate on that. And what that means is, for them, autonomy is not anti-Trinidad. Autonomy is about their having a say. So what does that mean? It first means that when you're designing the Tobago government, and whatever we say for the Tobago government will apply to the local government bodies in Trinidad, and the Constitution has to recognize all of it. You need the THA to be changed from the current authoritarian structure, because they recognize they don't have no say in that. That structure could only change if you increase the size of the THA from the current near 19 members to somewhere near 42, 43, 44. My optimal calculation is about 55 members. You restrict the Executive Council to 8, and you say everybody else going to the THA to make law to ring-fence Executive Council behavior. You can't make those laws in Trinidad. They have to be made here, because only we will know the facts about Executive Council behavior that need to be restricted and constrained by law. And therefore, only we will know the design of the laws relevant to that. Nobody in Trinidad could know. That would apply to the local government bodies down there as well, if you're constraining the operations of the Executive Council. And what that really means is you set up oversight committees inside the THA with the remaining, say, 40 members outside of the Executive Council, whose job it is to go to the THA to make law, not to implement law, to make law. And there, they will organize themselves into these same 6 committees. You don't need more than that for the number of divisions you have in Tobago. And they will have a mandate to call in the communities and call in the population to hear from them on any important matters about which they're going to have to make law. Right? That is what brings democracy to the doorstep of the citizenry. And when that is put in place, it allows the THA to make good law, to instruct the Executive Council, this is what the people at Tobago say they want. So that's the first thing. The communities also want a Tobago Senate elected, right? So that they could play the role of ensuring spatial equality across Tobago. So you suddenly don't have 50, 60, 100 years pass and Lansford is still in the doldrums. They want an elected Senate with the responsibility to ensure spatial equality of development, or at least of access to development opportunity across the board, right? So everywhere you go in Tobago, they will have access to that. That Senate, of course, will be such that no member of that Senate, like in the National Senate, no member is in the cabinet. Their job is just to look after the spatial equality of access to development opportunity. And nobody from the Senate, like now you could take anybody from the Senate and put them in the cabinet. Now you don't want oversight Senate with oversight powers, to have its own members in the cabinet to be overseeing them.
In other words, you don't want no infiltration, and you don't want no overdue...
Himself to himself, as Spoiler would put it. You don't want that. You want to separate the executive, locate the executive in the lower house, and all the executives come from there. Right? You live or die by the people you put up to run.
And well, that's going to be the point that we're going to have to end this conversation this morning. But I want to thank you so much, Dr. James, for giving us some insight into some real practical ways in which that we could perhaps develop or change our constitution for the better. And we're looking forward to see how the next few months unfold. And as we heard, there's a public consultation happening on Thursday by the Constitution Oversight Committee. So it's going to be interesting to even hear some of those views come out there and to see where it goes.
Public consultation where?
I think I might have to check with my directors to remember where. But
in Tobago?
Yes, in Tobago, yes, it's happening on Thursday. So I think it's happening at Bell Garden. So, but I mean, anyways, we're gonna keep track of these things. So, and Dr. James, of course, we're not done with you as we discuss all the different facets of this. So I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Kandace.
And viewers, thank you for being here with us. And we will see you again, perhaps either tomorrow or the day after. Tomorrow is Eid. So to our Muslim brothers and sisters, I want to wish you all a Eid Mubarak. And we will see you again on Thursday. 60,000 people strong, and the vibes is